sisters, we are going to do something extraordinary. We expect pressing calls, grand occasions. Each member should be ambitious to do good. The Lord has said, when ye are in the service of your fellow beings, you are only in the service of your God.
When Eric and I were newly married, we bought a house near Weber State. We finished our schooling and we started our family, and soon it was time to move. So we put the house up for sale and it sold within the first few days, and we had to be out by the end of the month. With a job and a busy toddler, it was difficult to get everything done that I needed to. And my friend Rosie, who I served with in Young Women's, came over and helped me clean my house and helped me finish packing. And the skills that she taught me that day are lessons that I've used throughout my life. And I am so grateful for her service that she gave me, and I think of her often whenever I give service.
So about a year ago, I started not feeling well. I was super fatigued and was having stomach problems, and I went to my doctor and they found that I had symptomatic bradycardia. And so they referred me to a cardiologist. And when I went to the cardiologist, they noticed that my heart rate was really low. And so it was kind of a string of tests and hospitals and doctors and ERs after that point. My husband was still needing to travel a lot for work at the time. And it was hard to care for my 5 kids at the time. I was so out of breath that I would have to hold onto walls as I walked and not able to do just the simple functions from day to day. And that service that was rendered for my family was something that I had a really hard time accepting, but I'm so grateful that I learned to accept the help from them. There was so many meals brought in and sweet little gifts and texts and phone calls, and it just made the world to me. And on hard days, I really needed the comfort of those sweet hugs from those amazing sisters.
In June of 2007, I was scheduled to attend a dance conference in Germany and Austria with some of my students. Along about January, I'd started having a very persistent feeling that I wasn't going on this trip, and I couldn't shake it. But that morning, as we started our descent into Munich, and I looked out the window and I could see the churches and the clock towers in the countryside, I said, well, I guess I am going on this trip. And that feeling left me, and I found some peace that day. When we landed in Munich, I turned my phone on, and I had several messages to call home. Once I got a hold of my family, I found that my mother had had a heart attack and passed away while I'd been on that flight. I had one student with me who was also an assistant. She was a little older. Her name was Megan. And we sat and cried together as people deplaned. I realized I wasn't actually going on the trip and I had to go home. The flight attendant came and he said, well, what's happened? What's going on? And we told him, and he said, all right, hang on, let me see what I can do. And he came back a couple minutes later and he said, you got your passport, right? And I said, yeah. And we got up and walked off the plane. At the end of the jetway, we were met by a little German lady dressed in a Delta uniform, and she took my hand and walked with me and took my passport from me, never said a word. And she walked to the gentleman that was going to be stamping our passports, and she talked to him, and he looked at me, and he looked back at her, and he looked down at my passport, and he stamped it. And she came back and took my hand and walked me through. We never waited in line. We walked right past. Then she walked me to a ticket counter and spoke in German to the girls behind the ticket counter. One of them immediately passed me a package of Kleenex, and they took my paperwork and got to work. My phone rang, and it was Megan, who had gone through to baggage claim. She pulled my bag off the turnstile and she had opened it, and she said, okay, what do I need to take out? What do we need to keep? She said, I don't know what to do with it now. And then she said, oh, your little friend's here, wait a minute. And my little German lady, who I hadn't even noticed had walked away from me, was standing there next to her with a baggage handler. I turned around, didn't quite know what to do, but there was my little German friend. And she took my hand again, and she walked me over and assisted me in the process of getting back out of Germany and getting through security and back down to the gate. And as we got through security, she put her arm around me and she gave me a little squeeze, And she turned and walked away, having never said a word to me. And I hope that someday I can meet with her, tell her what a blessing she was to me that day in helping me through such a traumatic moment in my life and getting me back to where I needed to be so that I could get home to my family. And that was the kindest thing I think anyone's done for me.
It was the morning of December 5th, 2001. My husband and I knelt down and had family prayer with our 5 kids and kissed them and hugged them goodbye. We drove to the Prescott airport. The goal that day was to fly down to Rocky Point and check things out. My husband had been given a career opportunity that we felt like we couldn't turn down. Originally, my husband was going to be the only one that went, along with his employer and then the partner son. When we got there, there was ice on the wings and snow on the ground, and so the pilot turned the plane around so that the eastern sun could beat down on the wings and melt some of the ice. But unfortunately, between the weight of 4 passengers and our luggage and still the ice that was left on the wings, we weren't getting any lift, and we barely cleared the trees at the end of the runway. The pilot knew something was wrong, and so he made the decision to turn back towards the airport, and that immediately spiraled our plane into the ground from about 250 feet up. They found us, my husband and I, on opposite sides of the plane on the ground, but the 2 passengers who were in the front seat were killed on impact. They were able to fly us down to the Arizona Burn Center. I was there for about 6 months and then did a month of inpatient rehabilitation. My husband was at the Burn Center for about 6 weeks and then did rehabilitation after that at home in my sister's home. And there were people from around the world that stepped in to help either financially or in various ways. But I have to say that the service that has touched me the most and meant the most to me was a sweet little sister in Prescott. She was my visiting teacher. At the time, she was pregnant with her first baby. We had worked in Young Women's together, so we were really close friends. And she volunteered to step in and stay with my kids at our house that first week. That in and of itself just blows me away, that she was willing to take on that task of a barely 4 to 14-and-a-half-year-old. Because she loved them and she loved me, she did it. But she went above and beyond in my mind, because when you talk to my kids, that week she spent the majority of her time not just taking care of their physical needs, but their emotional needs. She played games with them, she read to them, she sang and danced with them. The kids said that they did little skits together. They played sports outside. She did everything that she possibly could to keep them happy and lighthearted and not worrying about the fact that their mom and dad were fighting for their lives 2 hours away. And that means the world to me. I can't thank her enough for that. She allowed them to still be little kids in the midst of a very adult trial. And of all of the service that was rendered during that time, I have to say that's the one that meant the most to me.
So when I was in middle school, I made a poor choice in friend groups, and in order to fit in with those friends, I started making some pretty bad choices. And I decided when I went to high school I wanted a clean break. I was going to start over and make some new friends, but the problem with that is that I went to a school where I had no friends. So it was a huge risk to start over, and took a lot of courage to just go with no friends. And so I was so lucky to meet a friend, and her name was Angie, and she was fantastic and bubbly and outgoing and wonderful. And Angie knew my history, but she had the ability to see past all of that and love me anyway. And Angie did this great thing, and she just started inviting me. And she would invite me to church, and she would invite me to church activities, and she would invite me to clean parties. And over time, her friends became my friends, and the boys that she dated were also some of the boys that I dated, and their goals also became my goals. But this time it was different. They weren't because I didn't change my goals because I was trying to fit in. This time I changed my goals because I was no longer afraid to choose the right. And so that one simple thing, that one act of inviting, completely changed the trajectory of my life.
So about 9 years ago, I was 8 weeks pregnant with my fourth son, and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that was attacking my kidneys. They told me I needed to go home and end my pregnancy and come back the next week ready to start chemo. And without that treatment, I probably had about a month to live. And through a lot of miracles and priesthood blessings, they came back and gave me an alternate treatment. I responded to really quickly and did really well on that treatment, but it also required me to be on bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy. And I relied on people for everything. We had friends that took over the carpool, took my oldest to and from kindergarten. My mom put her life on hold to raise my kids and take care of us every day. Had people that did ironing, and I don't really even iron, so that was like just an added perk. Someone planted flowers, bought a pot to put next to my door and planted flowers. And I'll never forget driving home that night and seeing the flowers there and the joy that it brought to my life during a time that was difficult, and it was such a bright spot in my day. It was something just so simple that someone just dropped off, and but it wasn't simple to me. It meant a lot to me. Just people expressing their love for me and telling me that they were praying for me. I was serving as the compassionate service leader at that time, and my sweet visiting teacher took over my calling for me, and my heart has been very, very tender. These are tears of immense gratitude for all the service that was given to me and my family and the love that was extended. I have never felt the Savior more strongly in my life, and that He was more aware of me and the things that we were going through than during that time of my life. And a lot of that was because of the service of other people, that we felt the Savior's love for us through others.
No doubt at times you recognize so many such opportunities that you may feel somewhat overwhelmed. Where do you begin? How can you do it all? How do you choose from all the needs you observe where and how to serve? Often, small acts of service are all that is required to lift and bless another. A question concerning a person's family, quick words of encouragement, a sincere compliment, a small note of thanks, a brief telephone call. If we are observant and aware, and if we act on the promptings which come to us, we can accomplish much good.